are going to, because of Joe Biden's track record, whoever comes after Joe Biden is going to either A, be just as progressive as Joe Biden, which is not a lot, or B, be more progressive than Joe Biden, because Joe Biden wasn't all that progressive to begin with. So your guys are wrong on that front. That's what it is.
President Barack Obama reportedly has concerns about President Biden's ability to stay at the top of the ticket. This told NBC News the former president sees Biden's victory as, quote, getting harder, one of the sources said. The Washington Post reports former President Obama has said President Biden needs to seriously consider the viability of his candidacy. And with those comments, Willie, finds himself in a situation that is getting more grave.
Yeah, and the Biden camp, though, pushed back.
They did. The Biden camp offered some of the most aggressive pushback, with one source telling NBC News, quote, can we all just remember for a minute that these are the same people who are trying to push Joe Biden out, are the same people who literally gave us all Donald Trump. In 2015, Obama, Pelosi, Schumer pushed Biden aside in favor of Hillary. They were wrong then, and they are wrong now. The source also pouring water on concerns over Biden's poll numbers, pointing to polling back in 2016, the election that showed Hillary Clinton leading Trump by as much as 9 points. That source adding, quote, how did this all work out for everyone back in 2016? Perhaps we should learn a few lessons from 2016. One of them is polls are BS. Just ask Secretary Clinton. And two, maybe, just maybe, Joe Biden is more in touch with actual Americans than Obama, Pelosi, Schumer.
So, John Heilemann, this is...
No. Do I remember correctly? Biden refused to run? Well, you do remember the media narrative correctly, but if you were in here, I've talked about this quite a bit. I talked about this in 2020, as a matter of fact. Obama told Joe Biden not to run in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. That's literally what he did. Obama then, I think, for two different reasons. One, because he was terrified of Bernie Sanders, and two, because he felt bad, I guess, about doing that, launched an advocacy campaign for Joe Biden when it was far too late in 2020.
This is fascinating because there was sort of a tale of two Biden campaigns yesterday, and a tale of two Democratic parties. You would listen to most of the people that were talking yesterday were suggesting that the president is moving in the direction of getting out of the race, and there's very specific discussions taking place. But you also had campaign officials who aggressively pushed back on the fact. But again, let's be clear here that you have had Schumer, Pelosi, Jeffries, Barack Obama, just about every major Democrat expressing their concern directly to President Biden. Reverend Sharpton, I saw in the New York Times in an article, expressing their concerns that he could lose and he could damage his legacy. And a spate of polls, now even public polls, CBS has him down 5 points. Swing state polls seem to keep going. And
what happened, bro? What happened, Joe? Joe, what's going on? Joe, I am only a Joe Scarborough watcher and nothing else. And let me tell you, I am shocked, I tell you, of the severe narrative change over the course of the past 48 hours. Joe, why are you saying things that are the exact opposite of what you were saying up until 48 hours ago, Joe? Now the polls are relevant? What the hell's going on, Joe? I thought you told me to not look at the polls. I thought you told me it was actually silly that the Democratic Party insiders were operating at the behest of elitists against the populist, socialist, revolutionary Joe Biden, the proletarian hero Joe Biden. They hated him because of what he presented. They hated him for what he represented, a working class movement. I thought that it was to say Joe Biden should step aside for a, black woman, but still, it's for Joe Biden to step aside. What the hell's going on?
bad direction, New Mexico, Minnesota, Virginia, New Hampshire, a lot of states that were not in play leading up to the debate, suddenly more than in play for Donald Trump. So what happens?
Yeah, Joe, and I think one thing that happened yesterday was as we were on this yesterday morning talking about the kind of extraordinary, kind of orchestrated a series of things that happened the day before. Yesterday, the kind of there was a little bit of a feeding frenzy around this, and I think that especially with President Biden having COVID and being in Rehoboth, the din, the kind of the clamor on cable news, I think for some people around President Biden started to feel kind of disrespectful, and that there was not a world where he, in an isolated state, where he was sick, I'm not trying to overblow it, but I think there was a little bit of an effort on the part of some people around the Biden campaign to kind of put the brakes, especially when some very specific reporting, people started making very specific claims about timetables and that the decision had been made and there was a timetable and here was what he was going to do. And I don't know about the quality of some of that reporting, but I'll say that they pushed back hard on some of that. And I think it kind of got overboard with them in that regard. And they wanted to throw a brushback pitch and sort of say, President Biden needs time, still needs some time, especially given the fact that he's ill. It is the case that the factors that you, Mika and I and everybody else on the show talked about yesterday did not get better yesterday. And by that, I mean, some very basic things. How do you run a presidential campaign without any money? That problem got worse yesterday because donors, and again, say what you want to say about them, have now gone to the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee and basically said, we're not just shutting off Joe Biden right now. We're going to shut off the congressional campaigns because your guys' job is, from our point of view, is to talk sense to Joe Biden. And if you can't talk sense to Joe Biden, why are we if we're not going to give him money because we think he has no path, and he's going to drag, we believe, on the basis of the metrics that we're looking at, I'm speaking as a fake donor here, he's going to drag you down. Why should we throw good money after bad into a lost cause in the House and Senate? So we're now talking about donors flexing their muscles in a way that threatens not just the reelection campaign of the president, but also all of those people who are running for reelection or seeking election in the Democratic caucus in the House and Senate. And so that has exacerbated the problem.
I literally never thought in my entire life that I would be in a position where I'm in agreement with like elite Democratic Party donors, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, the damn near entirety of the mainstream media apparatus, David Axelrod, Barack Obama, standing against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, and Ilhan Omar. Like, what the is happening? Broken clock is right twice a day. The libification, yeah, the why I left the left moment, I know. It's actually the supremely leftist thing to do. The supremely leftist thing to do is ensure that a genocide dare who's 850,000 years old, for simply malicious and spiteful and selfish reasons, stays in the race because it's his time, and then he loses to a out and about fascist. What's really annoying to me about all of this is that, like, God, the donors have so much power. I feel like the more they talk about the donors, the more people are going to polarize against pushing Biden out, because they're like, well, if the donors want them, then you and the donors. Now I'm riding with Biden. You know what I mean?
And some of the things that how.
No, they're mad at Biden because they can't control him. He's an independent force in the DNC, and with him gone, the Pelosi-Schumer dominance has no opposition. The Schumer dominance. I hope you're trying to make a joke and you're not being serious, right? Kamala won't be as progressive as Biden, though. All of this is making me support Biden instead. They'll replace Biden in someone they can't control. Can't you see that? Why are you making like QAnon conspiracies for Biden? And in your QAnon conspiracy for like Biden being this, like, this is blue MAGA. You know that, right? Like the idea that like Trump actually is not a representation of like exactly what the deep state is supposed to do, and instead like a brave, bold fighter against the deep state. Like, you're doing that for Biden right now because I trust AOC and Bernie. So if Biden drops out and AOC and Bernie say, okay, well, GG's, we tried. Kamala Harris is great. Will you forget how you feel about Kamala Harris? Don't put any blind confidence in a singular person, let alone a politician. That's insane. You can also, like I said, even go so far as saying you love certain politicians, you love their legacy, and still vehemently disagree with them. I've done that with Bernie Sanders quite a bit. Okay. Are you not going to auction because it started 40 minutes ago? I am going to the auction. I'm finishing this food and then I'm going to the auction. I told Connor I'd be a little late.
How grave that problem is rapidly becoming very clear. So that pressure is still very much on. And I think that, and then as you said, some of the polling numbers, as they become increasingly public, and I would just focus on one thing in particular, where some of these numbers, forget about what you think about battleground state horse race numbers. The attribute numbers, the number now that about whether President Biden is mentally fit for office, those numbers are getting to the point where they're quite scary, and you can't. It's very difficult to be reelected president if upwards of 80% of voters in the country don't think you're equipped for office, and so there's polling around that I know the Biden team, Schumer, Pelosi, Obama, all those people have seen just in the past few days that say that, and those numbers are not only are they bad, but they're very hard to turn around. It's hard to imagine how you're going to turn that around going forward.
Right. So, Mika, just to underline a couple of things that John said, that's nailed it. The biggest issue, immediate issue, is money. The donors have stopped giving money,
I'm just confused because Biden said he'll do it without them. That was really funny when he was like, yeah, I'll do it without the donors then. And then immediately 50% of the donations dried up because obviously even more than 50% of donations of the campaign is coming from the omega wealthy. Like, what are we talking about, dude? There is no grassroots mobilization in this country, let alone for someone like Joe Biden. As far as Kamala Harris versus Joe Biden goes on progressive legislation, like, I don't put a lot of emphasis on what a California senator did in their tenure, okay? But Kamala Harris has a relatively progressive track record, especially because she was a senator when Trump was president. And when Trump was president, she could make bold declarative statements about how much of a Marxist proletarian revolutionary she is because they knew they had no power. In that process, she actually voted for a progressive legislation. So if the metrics of your measurement for the boundaries of like whether you think a politician is good or not is their track record, then Kamala Harris is literally more progressive than Joe Biden. It's not even a question. I don't trust that regardless, though. One thing that I can point to, however, is that Kamala Harris has better instincts than Joe Biden in this process because post October 7, especially a couple months in, she openly and also through quote unquote leaks was fielding the media on her position on a ceasefire in Gaza. She literally was outflanking Joe Biden. That is actually unique. You don't really hear that. You don't really see that normally. Okay. So that is like one of the only instances. That is one of the only instances where I've looked at something and went, I think Kamala Harris might be trying to separate herself from the top of the ticket a little bit, at least on this issue. And that to me shows good political instinct. Terrible instincts? You think that's bad? Are you kidding me? Talking about ceasefire in Gaza like 3 months before Joe Biden ever even brought forward a 3-phase negotiation process, which he's never like followed through on, by the way, is literally is actually very good. At worst, it shows that Kamala Harris recognizes that there's a youth vote contingency out there and a, Dearborn voter contingency out there that desperately needs to hear something that is, something that speaks to the humanity of those who are being lost to this genocide. Kind of see the point of progressives now. As you said, they're betting on a dead horse with a low chance of winning and actually doing what he said. But what are the odds of a president even mentioning progressive policies? Probably even lower. No, I don't think it's that low. I think that all of the other possible members are going to, because of Joe Biden's track record, whoever comes after Joe Biden is going to either A, be just as progressive as Joe Biden, which is not a lot, or B, be more progressive than Joe Biden, because Joe Biden wasn't all that progressive to begin with. So your guys are wrong on that front. Like, Joe Biden's legislative agenda has been more progressive than Democratic presidents of past. But that is actually not a consequence of Joe Biden's own personal conviction. That is a consequence of what the material conditions look like and what the demands are. It's kind of like this. Republicans used to lie about climate change. They still lie, but they used to lie back then as well. But now Republicans at least have to vote for hardening our infrastructure against some of the most damaging aspects of climate change, because that part is unavoidable. That's something that people in Texas are experiencing right now. You know what I mean? Legislators might say it's the Chinese conspiracy, but it still doesn't change the reality that you need to put funds in at least some kind of climate change combating infrastructure hardening initiative. Okay, that's why Republicans have moved beyond like, oh, we're spending too much money on this. It's made up. It's gay. It's fake. Chinese people made it up. To, yeah, Chinese people made it up, but we will vote for this infrastructure hardening. We will actually demand money to protect our voters and the people that live in this region. So it became unavoidable in many respects for any administration that would come into power to not do any kind of like IRA style bill. That's the reason why Joe Biden was more progressive than previous presidents. And he went above that too in some respects, for sure. But having said all of this, the likelihood that whoever comes after Joe Biden will be more progressive than he is it's pretty high. He's an 800-year-old center-right Democratic Party creature.
It's almost completely ground down to a halt. The story of Jeffrey Katzenberg telling President Biden this got eclipsed from the COVID diagnosis. So that is a problem. I will say also, you got a lot of information yesterday. There was a lot of information, a lot of off-the-record conversations, a lot of plans being made about President Biden moving toward getting out of the race this weekend. That stopped when there was some very specific reporting later in the afternoon. Mark Halprin being very specific on some reporting that other reporters, newspapers and networks had parts of that reporting, but not all of it together. I think at that point is when we started to see the campaign pushing back, because what people close to Joe Biden have said all along is he's a man of great pride. He can be stubborn and tough. Don't back him into the corner. If he's going to do this, let him do it his way on his time frame. And when all of these reports started coming out, that's when the campaign started pushing back. And I think part of that is giving him the space to make this decision, to finish making this decision with his family this weekend.
He's also a man of faith and a man of tremendous historic accomplishment. And look, it's impossible to ignore where this is going and exactly what started it. I'm not unaware of that. At the same time, I still believe that you don't know what you have until it's gone, and that there will be that feeling at some point.
You think there'll be if he leaves the race, you think Democrats will regret it?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
He said and had to correct himself. Oop.
People in Gaza.
Yeah, Kamala Harris gave the speech back in March, recognized the situation in Gaza, and this community gave her some credit at the time. I was here. Yep. Who the fuck is going to be like, oh man, you don't know what you got till it's gone. You paved paradise and put up a parking lot. You swapped out a fucking 800-year-old guy for someone who is at least a little bit more dynamic and younger and more coherent. Who would be a good VP pick if they went with her? A white man. A white man from a white man from a state that is like either like a red state, or a white man from a state that is a swing state. Not a woman. People saying AOC. Hopefully not Pete Buttigieg either. Mark Kelly, Andy Bashar. I know that what I'm saying also implies John Fetterman. I would die if that happened.
I'm against charter schools. They are wrong for our Commonwealth. They take taxpayer dollars away from the already underfunded